The wind was cold that night, wrapping around the mountains like invisible hands. Ethan drove his old truck through the lonely forest road, his headlights cutting through the mist. He was a young astronomer, a quiet man who loved the stars more than people. His small observatory was hours away, but the night was too long and too cold. He decided to stop for a while to rest near the pine trees and maybe take a look at the sky. He turned off the engine and stepped outside, breathing out a cloud of white air. Above him, the stars sparkled like diamonds scattered across dark velvet. Ethan smiled softly, feeling that deep peace only stargazers understand. He opened the back of his truck and took out his telescope, setting it up on the snowy ground. But as he lifted his eyes to the northern sky, something unusual caught his attention, a flash, quick and sharp like lightning but silent. It streaked across the stars, a burning line of blue light that didn't fade. Ethan's heart jumped. He had seen shooting stars before, but this was different. The light moved with purpose, changing direction, slowing down as if controlled. Then in a brilliant explosion of silver and blue, it vanished behind the trees. The ground shook slightly. A low rumble echoed from the distance. Ethan stared for a moment, frozen between fear and curiosity. He grabbed his flashlight, his gloves, and a thick blanket, then began walking toward the glow. His boots crunched on the frosty soil, and the forest grew quieter with every step. The air smelled of metal and something strange, like burning air. As he reached a small clearing, his eyes widened. There it was, a large, metallic shape half buried in the ground. Glowing faintly blue, steam rose from its surface, and soft humming sounds came from within. It didn't look like any aircraft he had ever seen. It was smooth, without edges or marks. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Was it a satellite, a drone, or something else entirely? He slowly stepped closer, feeling the warmth coming from the metal. Then he heard a faint sound, a soft cry. Almost human. He froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. He followed the sound, moving around the wreck. And that's when he saw her, a girl, lying on the cold ground beside the strange craft. She was young, maybe his age, but her skin shimmered like moonlight. Her hair floated slightly, as if the air around her didn't obey gravity. Her eyes were half open, glowing faintly blue, and she was shivering violently. Ethan knelt beside her, unsure if she was human or not. "Hey, can you hear me?" he whispered, but she didn't respond. Her lips moved, speaking a soundless language he couldn't understand. Without thinking, he took off his thick blanket and wrapped it around her body. Her trembling slowed. Her glowing eyes looked up at him for the first time. There was confusion there, but also something else. Recognition, curiosity, maybe even trust. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the strange ship behind them. Then she reached out and touched the blanket with her thin fingers. Her skin felt warm, too warm, like sunlight on metal. She held the edge of the blanket tightly, pulling it close to her chest. Her eyes blinked slowly, studying Ethan's face as if she was trying to understand what he was. He tried to smile, to calm her. "It's okay. You're safe," he said gently. But the moment he spoke, her body stiffened, and the ship behind them made a strange noise. The blue glow pulsed brighter and brighter, and the snow around them began to melt. Ethan shielded his face as a wave of warm air rushed past. When he looked back, her eyes had changed color, from blue to golden. It was as if something inside her had awakened. She whispered again, this time louder, and his flashlight flickered wildly. Then just as suddenly, everything went still. The light from the ship dimmed, the hum faded, and silence returned to the forest. Ethan's heart pounded as he looked at the strange girl lying in his blanket. She was breathing normally now, calm and quiet as if asleep. He stood there for a while, unsure what to do next. Should he call for help? Tell someone what he saw? But deep inside, he knew this was not something he could explain. No one would believe him if he said an alien girl had fallen from the sky, and yet here she was, alive, mysterious, and wrapped in his blanket. Ethan took a deep breath and looked at the dark forest around him. The stars above seemed to watch silently, as if they knew something he didn't. He decided to take her back to his cabin until morning. Maybe then he could understand what really happened tonight. As he lifted her gently into his arms, the ship behind them gave one last faint pulse of light, and for a second, Ethan thought he saw strange symbols glowing across its surface. He didn't know it yet, but this night would change his life forever. because he hadn't just found a visitor from the stars, he had shared warmth, and unknowingly, he had begun a bond beyond worlds. When Ethan woke up the next morning, the first thing he heard was silence. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of trees moving. It was strange, almost too quiet. For a moment he wondered if everything from last night had been a dream. But then he turned his head and saw her, the glowing girl, lying on his couch. Wrapped in his blanket, sunlight came through the window, falling across her pale skin. Her hair shimmered faintly like liquid silver, and her breathing was soft and steady. The glow around her body had faded a little, but she still didn't look human. Ethan sat up slowly, trying not to make noise. He had brought her home late at night, still half afraid someone would see them. She hadn't woken the whole time, just held his blanket tightly, as if it meant something important. Now seeing her in daylight, Ethan felt both wonder and fear. What was she really? Was she alive in the same way he was, or something beyond his understanding? He moved closer and noticed small, glowing lines across her neck and wrists, like circuits. They pulsed gently, matching her heartbeat. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Ethan whispered softly, "Hey, are you awake?" Her eyes opened instantly. They were bright and deep, like golden glass filled with moving light. She looked at him, blinking slowly, then looked around the small cabin. Her gaze stopped at the blanket, and she touched it again, pressing it to her face. Ethan almost laughed. It was such a simple, human action, but her expression was pure wonder, like she had never felt warmth before. He pointed to himself. "Ethan," he said clearly, then pointed to her, waiting. She tilted her head, copying his gesture, and after a pause said softly, Then her voice was soft, melodic, but slightly broken. Like she was learning how to use words, Ethan smiled with surprise. "You can talk," he said. She frowned a little, not understanding everything, but then repeated, "Talk." It was enough to make Ethan's heart skip a beat. He got her a glass of water, placing it on the table. She stared at it with wide eyes, then touched the glass as if testing its temperature. When she finally lifted it, she didn't drink right away. She studied the reflection of light in the water. It was like watching a child experience the world for the first time. Finally, she took a sip and her body shimmered softly. The glow around her skin brightened for a moment. Then she whispered something in her language. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the emotion behind them. Gratitude. Outside, a faint hum came from the forest again. Ethan went to the window and froze. 2 black drones were flying low, scanning the area. His heart pounded. Maybe the government or military had already found the crash site. He stepped away quickly, closing the curtains. When he turned around, the alien girl was standing now, her blanket still over her shoulders. Her glowing eyes narrowed as if she sensed danger. She raised one hand and instantly, every light in the cabin flickered. Ethan's old laptop turned on by itself, screens flashing with strange symbols. She didn't touch anything. The energy came from her. Ethan backed away a little, both amazed and afraid. "What are you doing?" he whispered. She looked at him and said one clear word, "Hide." Before he could respond, she touched his arm, and for a split second the air shimmered. The world around them seemed to bend like heat waves on a road. He looked around in shock. Everything had turned slightly transparent. He realized she was bending light around them, making them invisible. Outside, the drones passed by, scanning the cabin but finding nothing. When they were gone, the air shimmered again and returned to normal. Ethan stumbled back, breathing fast. She looked at him calmly, as if what she had done was normal. Then she said softly, "Safe." Ethan didn't know what to think anymore. She wasn't just intelligent. She could manipulate energy, light, maybe even matter. He tried to ask her where she came from. Pointing upward to the sky, she followed his gesture, then placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "Far." Her expression softened, but there was sadness there. Deep and ancient, he realized she was alone, stranded far from her world. And the only thing she trusted here was him, a human who had given her warmth when she was freezing in the dark. The blanket slipped from her shoulder, and she caught it quickly, holding it tight again. It wasn't just fabric to her anymore. It was a symbol of kindness, of connection, something her people might never have known. Ethan smiled gently, trying to show her she wasn't alone. She smiled back a little awkwardly. But it was genuine. And in that small cabin, surrounded by cold air and silence, a fragile bond began to form, one that would soon face dangers beyond imagination. Far above them in the clouds, another drone silently watched, recording everything, and somewhere in a hidden control room someone whispered, "Target found." But Ethan and the alien girl didn't know yet that this small act of kindness and a simple shared blanket had already changed both their worlds forever. The morning sky was pale and cold, filled with thin clouds drifting like silver smoke. Ethan stood outside his cabin, staring at the forest where the strange crash had happened. The air was still, but he could feel something watching. The alien girl sat quietly on the wooden floor inside. Wrapped in the same blanket he had given her, she looked peaceful, almost human. Yet every few seconds her skin glowed faintly, like soft moonlight pulsing under her skin. Ethan had tried to understand her since sunrise. He brought paper, pencils, and even drew pictures to ask her questions. But she only answered with gestures, symbols, and strange sounds that made the air vibrate. Sometimes she spoke in her own tongue, gentle, musical words that seemed alive, and whenever she spoke, his old radio picked up faint whispers and static, as if her voice carried hidden frequencies. After a while, she walked to the window and looked up at the sky. Her eyes followed the slow movement of the clouds and then higher, toward the stars still faintly visible in daylight. She raised her hand, tracing invisible lines in the air. Ethan watched as faint blue shapes appeared, floating in front of her fingers, glowing symbols made of light. They looked like constellations, but rearranged, unfamiliar and beautiful. "What are you showing me?" he asked softly. She didn't reply but moved her hand again, forming a circle of symbols that rotated slowly. Then she placed her hand flat against the glass window. Outside, the clouds shifted unnaturally, parting in a perfect circle. The sunlight dimmed, and for a brief moment, Ethan saw something in the sky, a pattern of stars that shouldn't exist there. It was like a map written in light. The alien girl turned to him and said one clear word, "Home." Her voice was calm, but her eyes shimmered with sadness. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. She was trying to contact her world, trying to send a message, but how? Her ship was broken. The forest was silent, and yet the air around her vibrated with unseen energy. Ethan rushed to his telescope, setting it up on the porch. He aimed it toward the direction she had pointed, his heart racing through the lens. He saw a faint pattern of blinking lights far beyond normal stars. They were pulsing in rhythm, not random, not natural. He realized it was a signal. Someone out there was trying to answer her. "Is that them?" he whispered. She looked at him, nodded slowly, and touched her chest again. "Home," she repeated, then her expression changed, confusion spreading across her face. The light around her began to flicker unevenly. Ethan stepped closer, worried. "What's wrong?" She pointed to the stars again, her hand trembling slightly. Then she drew another pattern in the air, but this one looked broken, like the first map shattered in half. Ethan didn't understand at first, but then it hit him. Maybe she wasn't just lost. Maybe her world was gone, destroyed, separated, or cut off from her signal. The sadness in her eyes deepened, and she sank to her knees. Holding the blanket close, Ethan knelt beside her, unsure how to comfort someone who wasn't human. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and she looked up at him. Tears, tiny glowing drops, fell from her eyes and disappeared before touching the floor. Turning into faint sparkles of light, he whispered, "You're not alone anymore." She tilted her head, repeating softly, "Not alone," as if testing the meaning. That small moment of connection filled the cabin with a strange calm. But it didn't last long. The radio in the corner crackled suddenly, filling the silence with sharp bursts of static. Ethan turned to it, frowning. As words began to form in between the noise, signal detected, unidentified energy source. Forest perimeter closing. His heart pounded. Someone was tracking her again. He looked at the alien girl, who seemed to sense it too. She stood quickly, her body glowing brighter. Her golden eyes flashed as she whispered something strange, and the telescope's lenses turned dark, as if the glass itself refused to show the sky anymore. Ethan stepped back. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't answer. She was focused, listening to something only she could hear. Then she looked at him and said quietly, "They come." Before Ethan could react, the cabin lights flickered and the shadows outside began to move. He rushed to the window and saw figures in dark suits moving between the trees, carrying strange equipment. The same men who had been scanning the crash site were now coming for them. Ethan's mind raced. He had no plan. No weapons, nothing. But when he turned back to her, she was calm, standing tall. Her skin shimmered brighter than ever, her eyes glowing like two suns. She raised both hands, and every object in the cabin began to vibrate. The air grew thick, and a low hum filled the room. Ethan could feel the pressure, the power. It was raw, immense and terrifying. He shouted, "Stop! They'll find us!" She looked at him with soft sadness, then whispered one word, already outside. A blinding flash of blue light exploded through the forest. The trees bent from the force. The air itself rippled, and for a brief moment, all the stars above them seemed to flicker, as if answering her cry. When the light faded, everything went silent again. Ethan fell to his knees, breathing hard, his ears ringing. He looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, her hair floating in the faint glow. She turned back to him, her voice soft but clear. Now they know. Ethan didn't understand what she meant. But deep in the sky above them, beyond what human eyes could see, something vast and distant had begun to move. The message had been sent, and soon something would answer. The night came again, cold and full of wind. The forest around Ethan's cabin was dark, but it wasn't silent anymore. Somewhere beyond the trees, machines were moving. Their lights flashed faintly through the mist, scanning everything. The alien girl stood by the window, her golden eyes watching the shadows with calm fear. Ethan checked his phone. No signal, no power, nothing. The generator had stopped working after the bright explosion earlier. Every electronic device in the cabin had burned out. The only light left came from the faint blue glow of the girl's skin. Ethan felt trapped between fear and wonder. "They are coming," she said quietly, her voice low but steady. Ethan turned to her. "Who? The soldiers?" She nodded slowly. "Humans. But not yours." Her words confused him. But before he could ask, a low rumble shook the ground. Outside, through the cracks of the window, bright red beams moved through the forest. Dozens of drones hovered above the trees, scanning for heat, sound, and movement. Ethan's heart pounded. "We need to hide," he whispered. The girl closed her eyes, breathing slowly. When she opened them again, her skin flickered brighter for a moment. The shadows in the cabin shifted. Ethan blinked. The air itself began to bend. The walls and furniture faded slightly. As if turning invisible, she was hiding them again. Bending light to protect them outside, heavy boots crunched on frozen leaves. A group of men in black suits approached the cabin. Holding strange scanners, one of them spoke through a radio. "The energy source is unstable. Keep your distance," another voice replied. "Capture alive if possible." Ethan held his breath, praying they wouldn't come inside. The alien girl placed her hand on his shoulder, calming him. Her touch was warm, and he could feel the quiet hum of power beneath her skin. But the moment felt fragile because outside, one of the men stopped right at the door. He lifted a small device, and the invisible shield around the cabin flickered. The girl's glow dimmed sharply. She gasped softly, and Ethan saw pain flash across her face. The man outside shouted, "Found it! Energy reading confirmed!" The door burst open, and the illusion broke like glass. The cabin snapped back into view, and bright lights flooded the room. "Don't move!" one of the soldiers yelled. Ethan raised his hands instinctively, trying to shield the girl, but she stepped forward instead, her golden eyes glowing fiercely. For a second, the soldiers froze, not from fear but confusion. They had never seen anything like her. She whispered a single word in her own language, and suddenly the lights in their helmets flickered off. Their devices sparked, and one by one they stumbled backward. The room filled with static energy, humming like electricity in the air. Ethan watched in awe as the girl lifted both her hands. The walls of the cabin shook, and objects began to rise. Books, tools, even the old telescope. Her power was wild, uncontrollable. "Stop!" Ethan shouted. "You'll hurt yourself!" But she didn't stop. The glow around her became blinding. Then, in one sudden burst, everything went silent again. When Ethan opened his eyes, the soldiers were gone outside. Only burned ground and glowing ash remained. The forest was quiet, but the air smelled of metal and lightning. The girl was on her knees, breathing heavily. Her hands trembled, her light fading to a dull shimmer. Ethan rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" She looked at him weakly and said, "Too much. Energy." He helped her stand, wrapping the blanket around her again. She leaned against him, exhausted. He could feel her heartbeat, fast, uneven but still strong. Ethan looked around. Realizing they couldn't stay here anymore, the cabin was destroyed. And whoever sent those men would send more. "We have to leave," he said, grabbing a small bag and flashlight. She nodded slowly, though she seemed barely able to walk. Together they stepped out into the night. The moonlight spilled across the snow, making the world look silver and endless in the distance. Small lights still blinked among the trees, and more drones. Searching, Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. Leading her toward the mountains, they walked for hours, following the narrow path through the dark. Sometimes she stumbled, but each time Ethan caught her, and every time he did, she looked at him with quiet trust. It wasn't human emotion exactly, but it was close. By dawn, they reached an old cabin near a frozen lake. It looked abandoned, but safe enough to rest for a while. Ethan started a small fire. Watching her sleep beside it, her breathing had steadied, and the blanket glowed faintly under the light of the flames. He couldn't help but wonder what she was, really. A lost traveler, a survivor, or a messenger from somewhere far beyond human reach. Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke over the forest, and for a moment it almost felt peaceful again. But then across the frozen lake, a faint blue light blinked in the distance. Ethan stood quickly. Realizing it wasn't the sunrise, it was a signal. The same kind of light he had seen when her ship crashed. He turned to her, whispering, "They found us again, didn't they?" She opened her golden eyes slowly, her voice quiet but sure. "Not them," she said. "Mine," and with those words, the air around them began to hum again, a soft, deep sound that seemed to come from the stars themselves. Ethan felt his chest tighten as the light outside grew stronger. He didn't know if they were being saved or hunted. But one thing was certain. The pursuit had only just begun. The air above the frozen lake shimmered like heat on metal. Ethan stood frozen in place, staring at the strange blue light growing brighter across the ice. The alien girl slowly rose to her feet, her golden eyes glowing with a soft, steady light. Her face was calm, but there was something heavy in her expression, like she knew what was coming. Ethan whispered, "What is that?" She looked at the light for a long moment before saying softly, "Home calls." Her voice was full of both hope and fear. The light pulsed again, and a low hum spread through the air. The frozen lake cracked faintly, sending small ripples of blue light across the surface. It was like the lake had turned into a mirror reflecting another world. Ethan stepped back, feeling the ground vibrate beneath his boots. "What's happening?" he asked. The girl didn't answer right away. Her eyes focused on the reflection forming on the ice. Shapes appeared, large, mechanical, and glowing. Like parts of a ship trying to rebuild itself, she whispered something in her language, and the air around them responded. Tiny sparks of light rose from the snow. Floating upward like fireflies, her body began to glow brighter, her skin tracing with golden patterns that moved like living circuits. Ethan could feel the warmth spreading through the air, but her face twisted in pain, and she fell to her knees. He rushed to her side. Catching her before she collapsed, her body felt hot. Burning like metal left in the sun, he shouted, "Hey, stay with me!" But she barely heard him. Her eyes flickered between gold and blue. Something inside her was unstable. Her energy was burning too fast. Ethan realized she was connected to the ship or whatever was forming over the lake. The more it built itself, the weaker she became. He looked at her small pod, which he had carried from the forest earlier. It lay nearby, dark and silent, covered in frost. Ethan suddenly remembered the solar equipment in his truck. Broken, but not useless. He ran to the vehicle and ripped out the small battery pack. He connected wires to the pod, hoping to give it enough power to start. Nothing happened at first. Then, as he touched the panel, the alien girl whispered from behind him, "Together." Her trembling hand pressed over his. The moment their skin met, a surge of blue light rushed through the pod. It powered on instantly, glowing like a small sun. Ethan stumbled back in shock as the pod hummed loudly. The girl stood slowly, her body surrounded by a halo of golden fire. The glow in her eyes returned stronger, brighter, more alive than ever. Her voice echoed softly, not just in sound but in vibration. "You shared warmth. Now I share life." Before Ethan could respond, the symbols on the pod spread outward, floating in the air like glowing patterns. They surrounded her, lifting her slightly above the ground. The energy around them became intense. Snow melted instantly. The frozen lake cracked open, revealing a pool of glowing blue light beneath. Ethan shielded his face as the brightness grew unbearable. He heard her whisper something, words he didn't understand, but he could feel what they meant. It was gratitude mixed with sadness, mixed with something beyond human emotion. Then everything stopped. The air went silent again. The lake stilled, the light dimmed, and she slowly lowered back to the ground. Ethan rushed forward, worried she might have burned herself out. But when she opened her eyes, they glowed with calm strength. The golden light around her pulsed softly, steady and peaceful. He smiled weakly. "You did it." She nodded. "Power. Awakened," she said slowly, her English getting clearer. Ethan felt a strange comfort hearing that, but deep inside he knew it wasn't over. The drones that had been destroyed earlier were back, far away but approaching fast. He could hear their faint buzzing echo through the forest. She turned her head toward the sound and whispered, "They come again." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then we leave before they find us." He helped her walk toward the woods, her hand still warm in his. But as they reached the edge of the trees, the ground shook again. A massive beam of blue light shot down from the clouds, hitting the lake where the ship's reflection had been. It wasn't human technology. It was something else, something older, something alien. The girl looked up, her face calm. "My world hears me," she said. Then her tone changed, her eyes darkened slightly. "But others hear too." Ethan didn't understand. But the fear in her voice told him everything. If her people could find her signal, then maybe her enemies could too. The power she had awakened wasn't just light. It was a call across galaxies, and now whoever had been searching for her would know exactly where she was. The blue beam faded, leaving behind silence. The stars above seemed brighter, watching quietly from their endless distance. Ethan and the girl stood together in the quiet forest. He wanted to ask what would happen next, but she only said, "We run until the sky changes." He nodded slowly, understanding without words, because now he knew. The blanket he once shared had begun something larger than both of them, something that connected two worlds. And now that her power had awakened, there was no turning back. The night had turned darker than before. The stars above seemed to fade behind thin clouds, hiding their light. Ethan and the alien girl walked through the forest quietly, their footsteps muffled by snow. The cold air burned in his lungs, but he didn't stop. Something deep inside told him this silence wouldn't last. The girl walked a few steps ahead. Her faint golden glow guiding the path, she moved slowly, like she was listening to something beyond human hearing. Every time the wind changed, she would pause and tilt her head slightly. Her eyes scanned the trees, alert, calm, and unreadable. Ethan watched her, both amazed and worried. She looked stronger now. Her energy had returned. But there was still pain behind her calm expression. After what felt like hours, they reached an old wooden cabin hidden between tall pines. Ethan had built it years ago as a backup shelter. It wasn't much, but it was safe and far from the road. He opened the creaking door, and the warm smell of wood welcomed them. They stepped inside, shaking the snow from their clothes. Ethan lit a small lantern, filling the cabin with a soft orange glow. The alien girl walked around slowly, touching the wooden walls with curiosity. "This home?" she asked softly. "Something like that," Ethan said with a tired smile. He placed the blanket, the same one they had shared, near the fire and motioned for her to sit. She did, wrapping herself in it carefully, almost like it was something sacred. Ethan sat across from her, watching the flames dance in her eyes. For a moment there was peace, no ships, no drones, no danger, only the sound of fire and wind outside. Then she spoke again, her voice quiet but heavy. "They will come soon." Ethan's heart sank. "Who?" She looked into the fire. "The ones who made me fall." Her words were simple, but the meaning behind them hit him hard. Ethan leaned forward. "You mean someone attacked you?" She nodded slowly. "My kind? Not all good." Her eyes flickered golden blue as she spoke. "Some wanted peace, others wanted power," she continued. "I ran. They followed. Ship broke." Her voice trembled at the last words, and Ethan could see the fear she tried to hide. He wanted to comfort her. But before he could speak, the cabin walls shook. A low hum spread through the air, the same kind of sound the drones had made. Ethan stood up fast, grabbing his flashlight and looking through the window. A faint blue light was moving between the trees. "Slowly but steadily, they found us," he whispered. The girl closed her eyes, breathing deeply. No, she said softly. Not them, before Ethan could ask. A soft metallic sound came from outside. A small sphere floated past the window, glowing gold instead of blue. It stopped, scanned the area, and then projected a beam of light onto the ground. A symbol appeared. The same one that had glowed on her skin earlier. Her eyes widened slightly and she stood, walking toward the door. Ethan grabbed her arm. Wait. It could be dangerous, she turned to him with a gentle smile. It's not danger. It's message. She stepped outside into the cold, her bare feet leaving glowing footprints in the snow. The golden sphere floated higher and a voice echoed. Soft, musical, and full of emotion. It wasn't English, but Ethan could feel its warmth. Her eyes filled with tears as she listened. Then she whispered, They come for me. My people, not enemies. Ethan's chest tightened. So you're leaving? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on him, calm, sad, and thankful all at once. You gave me warmth when I was cold, she said softly. You shared life. He tried to smile, but his throat felt tight. Guess I'll miss you, he said. She reached up and touched his face gently. Her hand was warm, glowing softly against his skin. Her eyes shone brighter. I remember, she whispered. Blanket of stars. Always the golden light from the sphere expanded, forming a tall, shimmering portal of energy. Snow swirled upward as the air vibrated. The girl stepped closer to it, her figure glowing brighter with each step. Ethan stood frozen, not ready to say goodbye. He opened his mouth to speak, but the light grew too bright to see. Then suddenly came a flash. The sound of the forest vanished. Ethan blinked, trying to adjust his eyes. The light was gone, the sphere was gone, and the girl was gone too. He stood there in the silence, staring at the empty snow. The blanket still lay near the fire inside the cabin. Glowing faintly, he picked it up slowly, holding it tight. A small symbol, the same golden mark from her hand, shimmered on the fabric for a moment before fading. He smiled weakly, whispering, Goodbye, Star Girl. But as he turned to go inside, the ground trembled from the sky above. A streak of blue fire descended. Another ship, but not golden, not peaceful. Ethan's heart froze, the air vibrated again, this time filled with a sharp metallic hum. He looked up and realized the truth. She hadn't left alone. Someone else had followed her signal through the stars, and they had finally arrived. The blue fire burned across the night sky like a falling comet. Ethan watched in shock as it split the clouds open, painting the forest in cold light. The ground trembled, trees swayed, and a deep rumble rolled through the mountains. He clutched the glowing blanket against his chest. Heart pounding like thunder, he knew this light wasn't hers. This was something else, like something darker. The ship came down fast, its blue glow twisting into sharp lines like lightning trapped in metal. It hovered above the frozen lake where everything had begun. Steam rose from the ice, hissing as the heat from the ship melted the surface. Then, with a final burst of light, it landed, shaking the earth. Ethan stood at the edge of the forest, hidden among the trees, watching. He didn't know if he should run or wait. A ramp extended from the ship with a hiss. Several figures walked out, tall, armored, and glowing with blue veins of light. Their eyes shone like cold stars, scanning the ground slowly. Ethan's breath caught. They looked like her, but their faces carried no warmth. They were soldiers and not explorers, not friends. The air around them hummed with power. One of them raised a strange device, scanning the area. A sharp pulse of sound echoed through the trees, and Ethan felt it hit his chest like a wave. The alien soldier spoke in their language, the voice metallic and harsh. The words meant nothing to Ethan, but the tone was clear. They were hunting. He looked down at the blanket in his hands, the faint golden light pulsing inside the fabric. It reacted to the blue energy in the air, glowing brighter every time the soldiers moved closer. Ethan whispered under his breath, Come on, where are you? He hoped she had truly reached safety. He hoped she was far away from whatever this was. But deep inside, he knew she wouldn't leave him behind. And he was right. A thin beam of golden light pierced the night sky far above. It cut through the clouds like sunlight breaking through a storm. The air shimmered, and a second ship appeared, and smaller, elegant, glowing with soft gold. The blue soldiers looked up, their weapons rising. The air between the two ships crackled as their energies collided. Ethan could feel the static on his skin, the hum of two worlds about to clash. The golden ship released a pulse, a knot of heat, but of sound it washed over the lake like a gentle wave. The blue soldiers staggered, their lights flickering. Then a figure descended from the golden glow, floating slowly to the ground. Her golden hair shimmered in the light. Her eyes calm but fierce. It was her, the alien girl. Alive, radiant, and no longer afraid. Ethan stepped out from the trees as she landed on the frozen ground. Their eyes met across the glowing mist, and for a moment everything felt still. Then one of the blue soldiers shouted something and raised his weapon. A bolt of energy shot through the air, bright and fast. Ethan dove to the ground as the beam struck near him. Sending snow flying, the alien girl moved faster than light itself, her hand raised, forming a golden shield. The blast reflected harmlessly into the lake. Exploding in a burst of blue sparks, she turned toward the soldiers, her voice echoing through the air. "Enough," she said, her English clear, powerful, and filled with emotion. "You followed me across the stars, but I will not fight for your power." The soldiers hesitated, their blue light dimming slightly. Ethan could feel the energy in the air shift. The golden ship above hummed softly, releasing a beam that connected to her like a thread of light. She closed her eyes and the patterns on her skin glowed brighter than ever. A massive golden wave spread outward, swallowing the blue glow. It wasn't destruction, it was peace. The soldiers froze in place, their lights fading to white. Their armor cracking gently, one by one they vanished into the light, dissolving like mist in sunlight when the light faded. Only the quiet forest remained. The snow fell again, softly, gently, like the world was breathing once more. Ethan stood slowly, his heart still racing. The alien girl turned toward him, smiling faintly. "It's over," she said. Her voice soft again, he looked at her, unsure if he should laugh or cry. "You came back," he whispered. She nodded. "Because you shared warmth. I couldn't leave you in the cold." The golden ship lowered itself gently, its door opening with a warm glow. She stepped closer to Ethan, holding out her hand. "Come," she said softly. "See the stars?" He stared at her hand for a long moment. He thought of his cabin, the fire, the blanket, his quiet human life. Then he looked into her golden eyes and saw something bigger than fear. He saw wonder. He took her hand. Warmth flowed through him instantly. The world around them melted into light. The forest, the snow, the earth, all fading into a swirl of gold and blue. They rose together into the sky, passing through clouds that shimmered like glass. Ethan looked down one last time. Seeing his world grow smaller, he whispered softly, "Guess I finally found my place," she smiled. "Among stars," she said. And as their ship vanished into the endless sea of night, the sky glowed for a long, long time, a golden light among billions of silent stars. A story of warmth shared between two beings from different worlds. A story that began with a blanket and ended with forever.